Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa panamo te moana. Hei haurahi mā tātou e te rangi nei, aroha atu aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. Home e, hui e, tāki e.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Discussing Tourism webinar. My name is Steve Henry, and I'm the Advocacy Manager for TIA and facilitator for today's webinar. The Discussing Tourism focus for today is engaging with the domestic market. And our panellists are Chris Roberts, Chief Executive of TIA. Chris will provide an update on current industry impacts and responses to COVID-19. Bjoern Spreitzer, newly appointed General Manager Domestic at Tourism New Zealand, will provide an update on Tourism New Zealand's planning to engage with the domestic market. And Takurua Mutu, Director of MDA Experiences, will also speak. MDA Experiences won the Māori Tourism Award at the New Zealand Tourism Awards last year. Tak will provide an operator's perspective on how they're dealing with COVID-19 crisis and their approach and learnings about the domestic market. Following comments and updates from the panellists, we will have Q&A from attendees. And please note that the Q&A button at the base of the screen and send your questions through. The webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes, however, may run for up to another 15 minutes longer if there's Q&A to get through. And we'll finish by 2:45 p.m. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Look, I think for starters, everyone's talking about three phases of what we're dealing with here at the moment, and that's respond, restart, and recover, or reimagine in tourism's case. And I know a lot of those who are on the call are very much focused on the first phase, the respond phase, which you could also call the survival phase. How do we actually survive this dramatic crisis? Now, in terms of that survival, some very good news for our industry in just the last hour with the announcement by the Prime Minister of what the Level 2 guidelines will look like when we go into Level 2. And the key phrase they're using for Level 2 is play it safe. And so it's all about doing things in a safe way. So for travel, as long as you play it safe, we can have travel. We can move around the country again. We have to do it safely. We have to keep our distances. We have to have good hygiene practices. And the message is the same practices that would apply currently for you at home or in your local area needs to apply when you're traveling somewhere else in the country. Prime Minister also acknowledged that a lot of Kiwis want to support tourism, but we all need to do it safely. So operators and visitors all need to play their part in that. So there's a lot of trust still involved here, and that we're all going to do the right thing, and that we're not going to, as a country, be forced back into Level 3 or Level 4. So there's been a lot of work gone in talking to government over the last few weeks to convince them that we can safely go to domestic tourism happening at Level 2, and it's great that it looks like it's going to happen. There's a small wrinkle to that. Potentially, the Prime Minister has also warned that when the announcement is made on Monday by Cabinet, they could decide to go for a 2.5. So not quite getting to Level 2 yet. It might still be some restrictions in place. No description of what restrictions might stay on in a 2.5 scenario. I suspect that's a warning to all of us to behave over the next week or so and not get ahead of ourselves and think that we're already in Level 2 now, because we're not. We're going to be told next week when Level 2 will start, and up till then we've got to abide by the Level 3 restrictions. Some of the other things that Level 2 will allow is obviously hospitality to reopen, which is really, really important. That's with a maximum of 100 people at any time. Interestingly, they have to be all seated, can't be standing in your premises. They have to be separated, so people coming in have to be at separate tables. And there has to be a single service, so no counter service. A single server has to come to that one table for the whole time that group is there and serve them all about tracing who's having contact with who. Outside gatherings, the government's actually got more stringent than it was previously, so it's also a maximum of 100 people for an outside gathering. It was previously thought it would be 500. Still, they're concerned about large public gatherings. In terms of your bubbles, you can all see your families and friends again, but please keep your numbers small. Recreation will be able to resume to some level, including professional sports, Super Rugby and netball are all set to go soon, but you won't be able to use your season tickets if you have one like I do, because there'll be no crowds, but there'll at least be something to watch on TV. And education's going to reopen all up as well. So a lot of good news there in terms of the respond or survival part of what we're looking at. Just quickly on what else we're looking for in terms of the restart and the budget next Thursday. We're certainly looking for what's going to happen post the 12-week wage subsidy. Plenty of hints that there will be something. It may look quite different and it may be much more targeted. Obviously, we would expect the tourism sector to be targeted as the most affected sector. We are looking for direct assistance to some businesses, further relief from government charges. There will be schemes to get people into new jobs, people who've lost their jobs, and so we hope for some announcements on those in the budget. But Grant Robertson has also firmly indicated that the budget's just the first step. There will be a series of rolling announcements over the coming weeks and months. Not everything will be in the budget. As Grant Robertson said this morning, the recovery will continue with interventions to sustain households and businesses and to get people working in combination with sector-specific support to help boost wider economic confidence and regenerate some of the sectors hit hardest by the pandemic. So we take those words on face value. That does suggest we're going to see ongoing support for the tourism sector. But in terms of the restart, I'll call it quits there and leave it to Bjoern to talk about some of the restart initiatives that Tourism New Zealand is going to be leading. Steve.
Great, thanks, Chris. Bjoern, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. Akira Kirk, nice to meet you all. A real pleasure, and thank you to TIA to give me the opportunity to sort of update everyone on where we're at with our domestic approach to Tourism New Zealand. We're calling it kickstarting domestic tourism, and I think Chris said it very, very well. Personally, I'm so excited that we're moving into a place where we've got momentum and moving into a place where we can actually talk about how we kickstart domestic tourism again. Just for everyone to see how the team at Tourism New Zealand, when I say the domestic team at Tourism New Zealand fits in, we are super laser focused on helping kickstart the tourism economy through domestic. So there's obviously the bigger piece around reimagine tourism. My team, we're going to be laser focused on helping kickstarting the tourism economy domestic first. We also do that because we know and we believe international will come back eventually to our shores, which we all believe in. But this one here, kickstarting domestic first, will help us to be ready when international opens again as well. What that looks like in our books, and it's great to hear that we, under level 2 are now able to have some travel movements again. I think in general, at Mind, I look at it, the biggest value for a company like Tourism New Zealand to get involved will be around how we then kickstart into level 1, where I think the consumer sentiment will be super ready to really travel widely in the country. So we're sort of having a lens on it to go, we're going to be operating in an economy that will be in recession. So we will have to work really hard as an industry to get Kiwis to spend in the medium term. But on the other side, we will have an audience that's keen to explore our own country because borders will remain closed to a certain extent. Research already tells us, which is really encouraging, Kiwis are super passionate about New Zealand. You all know that. And we also know that the desire for holiday in New Zealand remains strong, which is very exciting. But our research is also starting to point towards that Kiwis don't always fully know what a great tourism experience in New Zealand could look like. It's almost like a bit of an idea around, hey, I know my country, I know what I do. Oftentimes they don't see it through the same eyes as an international visitor, which from a marketing point of view is just a great opportunity to really tell that rich story and get Kiwis to participate in our fantastic activities, accommodation and transport. The last point I wanted to make is we're also obviously very aware that our sector, our tourism industry will look different as we go through this. So really keen to work with you as commercial operators and regions also to understand that and make sure that feeds into our thinking at Tourism New Zealand. The slide that I love, not only because I love great Kiwi pies, but also from the numbers on it, we're dealing with a sizable prize here. You see some different numbers. Sometimes the number I like to use now is when I look at New Zealand domestic travel at the moment, it's about $18 billion that excludes government spend in that. And on top of that, Kiwis spend about 9.3 billion going outbound. So if we can defend a big part of the domestic pie and in the short term also take some of that spend that usually would leave the country through outbound travel, that would be an amazing place to be and really help us kickstart our tourism economy. And if you take a longer term lens on it as well, wouldn't it be amazing in 5 years from now as a group when Kiwis travel a bit less going offshore and spend a bit more money on domestic tourism in the long term? So strategically, how we think will add the most value is help kickstarting the economy through really being focused on getting short-term stuff going, but also add a longer-term view how we can make New Zealand a better place, an enriched place with a more sustainable tourism economy with bigger spend in domestic travel. If I sort of had to break it down in our big job to be done, what we're focused on at the commercial Tourism New Zealand team here for domestic, we think we'll be talking to consumers that feel like, I've been in lockdown for weeks, borders are closed. Come on, excite me about a holiday in my own country. As a job to be done as a whole industry, we want to excite Kiwis about the domestic holiday. But we also want to start really positioning New Zealand as a great alternative to an overseas holiday. Other thoughts our consumers will have is around, hey, I kind of love to discover what all those overseas visitors are raving about. What do they love about New Zealand? Show me what I can do on a holiday in New Zealand. So our job will be not about getting New Zealanders to love New Zealand even more, because we already do. It's about how do we get Kiwis to participate in the tourism economy and invest and spend on commercial tourism products, accommodation, activities, transport. And we're going to do all of this during a recession. So consumers will be conscious that times are economically difficult. Big challenge, but I think we can do it as a whole industry. On a top level strategic approach, how we're thinking about how we're going to do this as a whole industry. Tourism New Zealand will lend our expertise to build a really strong campaign platform for domestic, which will build excitement about the domestic holiday and really lend the message to get Kiwis to participate in our tourism economy. We will then work through different consumer segments and working with you guys in the commercial sector and the regions, the RTOs will play a critical role in that, how we then activate it on a regional and a consumer level. So we're not going to do this by ourselves. We want to do this together with you. And I've had 7 days in the role now. The conversations I had so far, I've had so much support and partnerships offers from the likes of TIA, Air New Zealand, and lots of the commercial operators, the RTOs. We're going to do really well as we do this together. How that looks from a campaign strategy perspective, this is just an example, but we'll come out with a really great campaign platform, a campaign theme, and then depending on the time of the year, we'll have different campaigns talking to our domestic audience and leaning into those segments, topics that are more relevant at the time of the year. There'll be something around family holidays. Short breaks is a really, really rich territory to unpack, and then around passion points like ski or cycling, really beautiful things here that we can work from a marketing perspective. That's my last slide. I'll stop sharing. The last point I would like to make is we're not doing this slowly, so we're moving at speed. We're on pretty aggressive timelines at the Tourism New Zealand's end. So the team's been around, team of one currently, that's me, supported by the wider business. Week 1, we've had the strategy signed off, consulting with our partners out there. We're currently briefing creative agencies to get the campaign up and running. So we're working to a timeline at the latest by mid-June to be really in a position to go strong, and in parallel looking at some tactical opportunities right now as well, how we can support in the interim where it makes sense. Hey, with that, back to Stephen, and I look forward to questions on it later as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks Bjoern. Tak, over to you to tell us a bit about MDA Experiences and how you're coping in the current crisis and how you're thinking about domestic tourism.
Cool. Kia ora te whānau whānui. And before I kick off, I just want to say that word whānau, let's not use that lightly at the moment. I love this tourism industry. I was geared up, ready for 2 weeks' time, getting to trends and getting on the dance floor with all of you guys again. And I just want to make sure that we all understand we're going to come back. Tourism is down at the moment. We're on our knees. We're absolutely on our knees. But we'll get up again and we'll come back. And we'll come back stronger as well. But wars aren't won by everyone competing against each other, running to the front line individually. Actually, this is the most important time, if ever I've seen it, for the tourism industry to come together. I know there's a want to consider interregional competition to get those domestic markets here. Bugger that. Let's work together, team. Let's work together because we've still got a bigger picture for when our international tourists come back as well to work towards. So let's not lose sight of that end goal. Let's work together. Kia ora everyone, my name's Tak, and I, with my brother, own the MDA Group. We have 4 companies that sit under that group with 60 staff. Most of our business is in the international visitor sector. So we about 75% reliant on the international market, 25% domestic. Mainly sitting in the luxury market as well, so in that super high end, and obviously we've tanked as well, but we're a little bit lucky. One of our businesses is Mountain Bike Rotorua, which many of you are probably aware of. Rotorua is host to one of the most popular mountain bike parks in the Southern Hemisphere, and we are very fortunate in that is very strong in the domestic market. But we set a goal at the beginning of this whole situation, and we'll consider it a failure if we don't reach that, which is to retain all 60 staff across all 4 businesses. And so we're going to be relying heavily on that mountain bike business and our other initiatives to make that happen. And so we are hoping for a really strong comeback under Alert Level 2 of mountain bike visitors to Rotorua, to go shuttling, to go riding, to have extended stays here, no doubt like everyone else is, but we've also had to do other pivot moves as well to retain those staff. So we're a bit lucky. One of those 4 businesses is a trade staffing company, and we managed to get MBA approval under Alert Level 4 to operate that. So we've been able to redeploy staff in clusters as teams, shouldn't use the word clusters, as teams to stick together so that we can, at least if we're not having them work within our business, we can keep them together so that they're still going to be cohesive. So when we do come back to business as usual, we can make that happen. We're a nimble company, obviously, so we can make these sort of pivots, and I realize that not everyone can do that, but that is what we can do. We've got other pivot moves that we can make as well. So this weekend we're launching an online business, which is completely different to what we've really done in the past. It's a retail business, and in fact I consider it a model of how business should be moving forward, not just tourism. I'm talking about every industry. It's I suppose they call it social enterprise business, where 5% of all sales, of gross sales from that business, will go back into charity, because that's the other thing that's getting hit at the moment. It's not just businesses that are getting hurt. It's not just our people that are getting hurt. It's our charities as well, who do so much important work in the community, from things like Lifeline and Kids Can to our local trails trusts and organisations like that. So we feel a need to try and play our part to do that. So we'll launch an online shop this weekend, and yeah, those are sort of some of the pivot moves that we're making to help us garner as much chance as we can to survive this whole situation. So yeah, that's me and my brother and our businesses, and that's our goal, and it's kind of what we're up to. Steve.
Great, thanks, Tak. So we'll head into Q&A now, and I see there's already questions coming through, so we'll start working through those and continue to send those through. Bjoern, there's a couple here just from your presentation. What's an example of a consumer segment?
Yes, it's a really good question. So I think, TIA, you've done a really great job about, in 2016, building some insights around that, what a domestic segmentation might look like. So when you look at it, we sort of at TNZ tend to look at it from more like an audience perspective as well. So a really good one is, for example, if you unpack the family holiday opportunity, lots of pointers towards what that looks like. And within that, then you would look at how you execute it against a campaign, and then bring it to life through a specific campaign, not to encourage or build more family holidays, but in our mind then to go, how can we get New Zealand families, as they look at the New Zealand holiday, how can we get them to make it a more commercially impactful one for us as an industry, to really get them to participate in the tourism industry. Another example, and see those as working titles, because we're quite busy in finding more insights to really get narrow on those segments. There'll be something around how to explore nature and participate. Once you then unpack that from a passion point perspective, you will land in areas like ski, for example, which is a really good topic, which you then from a campaign perspective, we already got some great experience together with the industry, how we've done that in Australia. We should have those conversations in New Zealand as well around those topics.
Okay, another one for you, Bjoern, around the campaigns. When is the first campaign going to start, and what is the timeline of the campaign? So you might like to take those both off. Yeah.
So those of you who know me, I think quite a few will on this webinar, I like timelines and I like them pretty tight as well. So in terms of what I can share at the moment, we're moving at speed. The big question for us is really around when alert level 1 will allow us really to come into with this campaign and really help build that excitement and participation. So we are clear that the time is not under level 2. We'll help out and work with partners to work on activities under that level. But the big opportunity for us is under level 1. So when we launch this campaign, we'll just be heavily dependent on when level 1 allows us to do that. I think I spoke to it in my presentation. We're moving at speed, so we're going through creative concepts. We'll be in a position really quickly to launch a campaign, but it's driven by when consumers will be ready to see a campaign like that as well, which will be under level 1.
Thanks. This one's around pricing for the domestic market. Tak, I might get you to start. What will pricing look like in general for attracting the domestic market? Is there an expectation that discounting is required?
Well, I mean, I'll start off, and this is just my personal opinion. Let's not race to the bottom, everyone. Let's not just go straight into let's discount. I realise there is a lot of sound out there about tourism activities in New Zealand are too expensive. You know, I ask you, one, to have a look. Is that your target market? Are those people who are complaining about the prices realistically going to come and shop with you even if you drop it? Two, if we start racing to the bottom now, we start to affect everyone around us. It's not just your activity that you'll be discounting, you'll actually be pushing everyone else to do that. And let me tell you, if you're a company owner out there, if you're a business owner, you know exactly how much your product is worth. You know what your margins are and all that sort of stuff. So sure, look at your pricing, have a look at it, but let's not race to the bottom with pricing. Be realistic about the people who are complaining about the price of tourism activities around New Zealand. Consider, will they actually be the ones who will convert in the end, or are you simply going to end up doing yourself a disservice?
Hey, and Steve, if it's okay if I add to that as well, I think obviously tourism scene is not a commercial enterprise, so we won't have a view on the pricing, but I think Tak, what you just said is amazing in terms of when you look about what we are setting out to do to help the industry around really trying to position New Zealand as an amazing alternative to an international holiday for Kiwis. We know Kiwis spend money when they travel offshore. There's no question about that. But we'll help with our work to really get them excited about participating in the tourism economy. So from a promotional point of view, there'll be a lot of support in positioning us as a product that's really valuable and people should be happy to pay for it because it's a great product.
Bjoern, will TNZ be sharing the branding for the domestic campaign with operators so they can use it on their own collateral?
Great question. So I didn't have enough time to go into too much detail, but happy to share that in future seminars or just ask me as well how that pans out. So current working principle is this is our campaign, and with our mean us as an industry. So we'll build a campaign architecture that'll have assets that are shareable with as many partners as possible. I can't show you currently examples what that might look like, but that's how it's briefed in, and that's the absolute intent. This will only work if we do it together.
Bjoern, again on consumer segments. The last consumer segmentation of domestic was done in 2009. Will you be using the segmentation, or is there a newer segmentation that you're proposing to use?
Absolutely. Great question again. So again, 1 week in the role, I wish I had all the answers and all the segments completely padded out, but that's an area that we're working, yeah, it's underway. Would I ever use is in consumer marketing segments that are as old now? Do segments change? Yes. Do some of the truth within the segments hold true for a longer time? Yes, they do. So we're currently doing two things at the same time. We're using inside segments that we already have. Also, the tool that TIA had built before gives us some really good insights where that might lead us. And that data in there is newer than 2009. That's, I think, Chris, 2016, the data in there. So we're not working from that old data, but it needs to be better. So we're getting better data in there. We're also lucky as a company that has been operating international. We've got great friends in some of the bigger international corporations like Google and Facebook who've been super forthcoming, help us inform some of our decisions with live data. So that's a long answer to say we've got something to start from. We're building better ones. And as soon as we've got that work done, we'll be sharing that widely. Again, this is not years away. This is probably a matter of months to really get granular on it. What you'll see from us in the interim, though, from an insights perspective, the team's currently working on a good summary of what we currently have and turn that into insights. So that's about 2 weeks away from now that we've got that ready to share with everyone.
Just on data, domestic data or insight from an operator's perspective, what data sources do you use to inform your knowledge of the domestic market?
Yeah, we're a bit lucky. I mean, we're quite well connected to our RTO, and so we're working pretty closely in there. In fact, I sit on the tourism strategy group along with a number of others like Bruce Thomason and Tim Costa, which I'm sure a lot of people around here, or who a lot of people around here would know, Melissa Craig. And so we're getting really good data coming out of there from, obviously, from the collection that they pull through from the different activities, attractions, and their accommodation monitoring. So that's a big one for us as far as what the regional data is looking like. And then for our own business, you know, we every single person who comes through our business, we collect a fair bit of data, in particular for the mountain bike business. So we've got a really good understanding of who's coming into our forest, and given that we get about 500,000 people through the forest each year, we're getting some pretty good information about how we should be placing ourselves for the next couple of years. That's for sure.
Chris, I'm just going to bring you in here. There is some questions just around level 2. Has there been any discussion on what the social distancing implications will be for the likes of tour operators, transport and boat tours?
Yes, there has, and we're working on a series of industry guidelines, and the government has asked industries to write up their own detailed guidelines. Those will be checked in with officials. So there's a whole series of guidelines, and when they're all done, we'll be able to provide everyone with links for the various sectors guidelines on how to operate. But in general terms, the government's requirements are that in public settings, we all try personally to maintain a 2-metre distance. Then in a controlled environment, in a business environment where there is tracing going on, there's hygiene in place, a 1-metre distance is sufficient, but with all those hygiene practices. And then in those unavoidable instances where there may need to be closer contact than 1 metre, for example, an adventure operator attaching a safety harness to a customer, you are, of course, able to attach that equipment to your customer, but you need a plan that states how you're doing that, how you're minimising the risk, what safety precautions. It may be that your staff member wears a mask in that circumstance, but have a plan for those brief moments and minimise those moments of close contact. So it's a keep that 1 metre distance as far as possible, and have a plan that shows you've thought about this and you're treating safety seriously, and that will enable you to operate.
Thanks, Chris. I'm mindful we're just about to click into 2:30, which was our initial time. There may be some attendees leaving. So just for those who have to depart, just to let you know the webinar will be up on the TIA website by the end of today. And also just to note that we will be holding another webinar next Wednesday on operating at level 2. So we'll have a more fuller discussion on what that means for operators there. Bjoern, there have been suggestions of staggering the school holidays to help spread domestic demand. Are TIA or TNZ supportive of this concept? Chris, you might have a view as well.
Yeah, I think I'll pass it over to you, Chris. I haven't got an answer for that at this stage. As a personal dad, I'm not a big fan of it because I want to plan for when my kids go on holiday, but I'll pass over to Chris from the wider implication point of view.
Look, this was looked at a few years ago, and I know there are some supporters of this. Holiday parks, I think, were quite keen on it. There are a lot of complications for school education, which is obviously already heavily disrupted. So, look, it's not something that TIA currently has as a policy position, but again, it's not something we've opposed. I think it would need a lot more exploration to see whether the benefits would outweigh the disruption that it would cause.
And Chris, just adding to your point, sort of coming in from the expertise, what Tourism New Zealand really does from a consumer marketing perspective, I think that's when the segments that we identify will become in really, really handy. What we will see are different segments will be more valuable at different times of the year. So school holidays, family will be super valuable, no question, but there will be others that we can dial up at other times of the year.
Bjoern, there's a question here about would there be room for a campaign to show what tourism gives back to communities? There's the perception that we are too expensive. Operators often are giving back to communities, schools, sports teams, charities to support locals. We often don't talk about it because it isn't the Kiwi way. Is that coming into the thinking at all?
It's a really good question. I think hopefully, as you sort of learn, or as you say, Klaus, how TIA, TNZ and the industry works together, there's absolutely initiatives already underway, not to that specific topic, but I look at Tiaki, for example, which had a different goal at the time. But when you look at what the sentiment behind it is really sort of demonstrating us really as an industry, how we care about New Zealand. So there's already platforms out there that really speak to that. Getting a bit narrow from my specific team's perspective, our job is to get kickstarting the domestic tourism economy again. So within my team, we wouldn't be working on a campaign like this. We're really laser focused on driving that demand. But if I look at something like Tiaki, some of those platforms already exist, and certainly from what I can see from the numbers behind it as well, a super, super successful, I think, joint effort of the whole industry in talking exactly to a subject like that.
I can say from our strategy group point of view that's exactly the sort of recommendation we're making to the RTO, which is actually don't try and address this discounting and high price structure. Actually show the human face that's behind tourism. Show what tourism does in the community. Show that actually tourism are our people. The people that work, it's a quarter of our workforce in Rotorua here. So show the people's faces, show that it is real life people, not just a big commercial conglomerate. So that is definitely a big message that we are sending to our RTO to push.
Great. Bjoern, as all regions will be competing for the domestic market, would it be beneficial to ensure that we do not compete for the same business at the same time, implement each region having a specific date range for promotion?
Yes, it's an easy question to answer, and I'm pleased, like what Tak said earlier on as well, I think as an industry, we just really got to be aware and grown up enough around to really acknowledge that and work towards that. I think the work we'll bring to the table will really help with that as well. So Tourism New Zealand will not get in the business of trying to steal visitors from Dunedin or Auckland. Our job will be the layer around how do we get Kiwis to really participate in what tourism has to offer. That as a unifying campaign will really help with that.
Tak, so Toko, your move for social enterprise, something this industry should be looking at more broadly for New Zealand, giving back, purpose brands. What's your recommendation on how to start incorporating that further and perhaps even regionally?
Well, easy. Strip your business back, have a look at what you can, start pushing back to the community, and then work towards that. For our online shop, that was the premise on, almost the premise on what we started. So the first goal that we set out was how do we retain all our staff? So that is the first reason we started this online shop. The second reason was how can we give back from it? And the idea of giving back to charity, that literally came up in about 5 seconds from the start of that strategic planning session. So it's a hard one to say, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's just a tourism industry thing. I actually truly believe that this is the way that commercial enterprise needs to start focusing to move forward. I actually think that should be the norm across the world moving forward. And I realize it's an ambitious idea, but that's how we have to be. We have to start thinking about people more and more. We have to start thinking about place more and more. And so things like these Tiaki promises and your own sustainability promises and all that sort of stuff, we actually need to incorporate that not into mission statements, but into budgets and into planning for operations in your business.
And look, just adding to this, I think it's amazing. I think we're currently looking at it from a domestic perspective, but sort of speaking from as our international visitors will come back as well, that's obviously a trend globally that we want to be on as an industry already. I mean, as an example, in my time in LI, most of the shops they didn't even have prices anymore. You just paid for what you thought was what you wanted to pay, and I always paid more because it went back to partly a good cause as well.
Bjoern, just a question here in regards to the team. TNZ, will you be expanding the domestic team at TNZ?
I would hope so. So yes, definitely. So good question. Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, hopefully from what you've heard so far from my boss, Stephen, or Renee as well, we're not here treating this as a campaign, a one-off. We really want to help kickstarting the economy through domestic. So yes, we're currently building up the team. The structures all there. We're just now starting to get into the recruitment process, looking in some internal talent, and then also going external to get people as part of the team.
Great. Question here, Bjoern, and possibly for you too, Chris. Which is in terms of cycling, is TNZ working closely with New Zealand Cycle Trails? And a related question, is DOC being engaged in the process?
Yeah, so again, I think it's not just specific to the domestic Kickstart program. I mean, we obviously work with all those parties really closely anyway. Within that, of course, we will.
And I guess with my Cycle Trail board hat on, we've already discussed at New Zealand Cycle Trails, huge opportunity here for New Zealanders to get out and experience the great rides and other cycle trails around the country. While a lot of efforts have gone into attracting international visitors to come cycle here, the fact is for most of the cycle trails, the majority of people using them are domestic visitors. And so I think after being cooped up for a while, Kiwis will want to get out, and if the weather allows them, getting on a cycle and using a cycle trail is a good way to do it. So I think we're certainly recognising that for a lot of the domestic visitor propositions around the country, cycling could be a very key part of that.
Agreed, and I think the cycling is a really good example around. I think the challenge that we'll have to tackle as an industry is in terms of how do we get New Zealanders to actually participate in that from an economic perspective as well, in terms of how do we actually get them to take an overnight cycle trail where they stay in accommodation and do some additional activities around that. That for me is the opportunity. So it's a really good example to bring it to life with our challenges.
And if you have cycle trails near you, I can say that I've heard this from a couple of really reliable sources, that the two biggest bike retailers in the country, one is almost matching their sales for the same time last year, and the other is actually beating their sales for the same time last year. You got to remember, these retailers are only operating online or click and collect. So I would expect to see a boom in cycling and people traveling for cycling.
Chris, just a wage subsidy question. What do you think is going to happen with the wage subsidy? What's the feel? And an extension? Appreciate this is an opinion or best guess. Any of your thoughts on that?
All I can do, and it is a guess, is that it won't be an extension of the current scheme. So it won't just be a 6-week or 12-week extension of the current very broad scheme. There is enough talk about it being targeted. and it may also look quite different. So it is really hard to pick what they're thinking about in terms of supporting businesses to hang on to staff and to keep staff off the dole queue. I think if any sector is going to get ongoing support, it will have to be ours. But it may be a somewhat more complicated scheme than the current one, which of course was very simple, and people were getting some money into the bank within a matter of days of them introducing that. So yeah, it's going to look quite different. I'm hopeful that it'll still be very appropriate for our sector, but I doubt that it'll just be an extension of the current scheme.
Bjoern, how will the domestic team coordinate and provide information to RTOs? The question notes the difficult to undertake on an industry level currently results in considerable duplication of work.
Yeah, I don't see it that way, so I'll be quite straightforward on that one. So I've already started that together with Charlie at RTNZ as well. So we've got an engaged. I talk to the RTOs, the big forum, every second week at the moment. We've also just established a hands-on marketing group within that. So it's really important for me again as well. We want to make an impact here and really help kickstart the domestic tourism sector. So the RTO has been fantastic. So we've got a working group stood up at the marketing level to actually really get together and say, what does this campaign look like, which then flows into how the regions fit into that as well. So yeah, I don't see any issues there. We'll get this done.
Chris, there's been a couple of questions just around flights and aviation. Do we have any insight on how the flights footprint would look like? Currently, it's bare minimum.
Look, the aviation sector has been working very hard on guidelines for air travel, and I think that's certainly contributed to the government's decision today to allow domestic travel. They're quite satisfied that air travel around the country can be done safely. So I think we'll see those details come out from Air New Zealand and the airports over the coming days. Obviously, the physical distancing is quite a challenge when you're trying to get a domestic network established again and you can't fill your plane up entirely. So I'm sure that I know they've done a lot of thinking about how to manage that and then how to manage people moving through airports. But the Prime Minister is certainly confident that that can be done, and she's seen the material that the airlines and the airports have put in front of the government. So I think we'll see those details coming out pretty soon. And I think we'll all be looking forward to the opportunity, be it for business or leisure, the opportunity to travel around again by plane.
Right, sort of towards just closing questions now. Bjoern, there's been a couple of questions just around timing. You said you want to be up and running mid-June. With travel looking to start in 10 days, will TNZ be putting out pre-campaign messages?
Yes, I think it's really important, and to just really understand that, I think I'm a firm believer that level 1 will be the one that really will kickstart our domestic economy. I think there's a bumper coming straight after alert level 2, which is hopefully fantastic that Kiwis just want to get out. I think the challenge where we at the most well is really to how can we make this a sustained thing? Because people will want to get out. We don't have to do anything about it, hopefully at the start, but how can we sustain that? So the time that I said early on, mid-June, is based on we want to get ready from when we can be ready. There's some realistic timings around it as well to get good things in place. But sort of looking at the alert level system, that's what we're aiming for, to be in a position when it goes to alert level 1, that we're really ready and help kickstarting this. In the interim, there's some small initiatives underway that we're happy to support, and some of our partners have already been in touch around that as well.
All right. And Bjoern, last question, and it's on insight, which is always important to operators. Are there any toolkits or specific data or information Tourism New Zealand can assist with for businesses who previously have catered only to international clients, now having to shift focus to the domestic market?
Yes, there will be. I wish I could say I've got them already. So I think what I said early on from Insights, 2 weeks from now, we'll have a lot of insights collated and available to everyone. And I'll make sure that I'll work with Chris and the team that's shared broadly and widely, but we're getting that together at the moment. if you've got any specific questions, I mean, Steve and Chris know my contact details. Feel free to contact us as well. Happy to help. But sort of getting stuff ready, about 2 weeks from now, we'll have some really good insights collated.
Great. All right, well, we might draw it to a close there. Firstly, thank you to all our members for participating today and for your questions there. We had over 100 questions there to work our way through, and unfortunately we couldn't get through them all. Thank you to our panelists for your sharing of information and views. So thanks very much to you all. That's been great.
Thank you.
A couple of closing comments. The webinar will be available on the TIA website this evening and also in tomorrow's T-mail. And also a reminder to our members to visit our COVID-19 pages on the website. There's lots of current information, advice there and support for operators. A reminder, we'll also be running a webinar next Wednesday on operating at level 2. And there'll be a slide at the end of this webinar with some more details on that. Also, if you have any particular queries, please get in touch with us either via info@tia.org.nz or feel free to call us anytime. Our phone numbers are on the website contact page. So Chris, over to you to close this out.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you to everyone with their questions. And I see there's a lot there that we might collate some of those and pass them on to Bjoern and the team for further answers, and we can put some of those answers up. And some there also around exactly what operating at level 2 will look like, and we'll try to get some of those answers. A very good one there from Tim Baum about what the only having 100 people able to gather in an outside location and what that might mean for the ski fields. Quite frankly, I don't know the answer to that yet, but obviously that's an answer we need to find out, whether ski fields can operate having, I guess, 100 people in different bubbles around the ski field, or exactly what the government's thinking there. So still some unknown aspects to this, and we'll endeavour to get as many answers on operating under level 2 ahead of next week's webinar for you. But to close up today, thanks everyone. Kua mutu mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā. Anaki tia mai mātou katoa. O mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, ai o ki te aorangi. Kia ora. Have a good day, everyone.